Liberals and conservatives are not real. How lawyers and politicians have corrupted language to fulfill their political agenda. Liberal, conservative, these words spark many thoughts and emotions. Some people with more fragile dispositions consider these to be trigger words and are quickly infuriated by the mere mention of someone with a different political perspective. Unfortunately, lawyers and lobbyists have had undue influence in writing laws and ballot proposals. They easily co-opt the English language and manipulate it in a way that feels like Orwellian doublespeak. The terms liberal and conservative now take on a vapid trope-like quality that facilitates the bipartisan division which politicians exploit to their advantage. If the Democrats and Republicans are a little bit liberal and conservative in various aspects, but effectively centrist in the majority of their policies, it then becomes much more difficult to discern the two. Contrary to popular belief, liberal and conservative are not antonyms. These terms have been hijacked and manipulated by lawyers to suit their political aspirations of the Democrats and Republicans. Democrat does not equal liberal. Republican does not equal conservative. Neither party is 100% aligned to liberal or conservative values. No politician, no voter is 100% liberal or conservative. They were, after all, the same party, the Democratic-Republican Party, until their split in 1834. And I would argue that they never actually split, that the way they run the country is basically an elaborate version of the good cop, bad cop routine, or divide and conquer. But I will save that for another video. The objective of this video is to define the terms liberal and conservative, so we have a baseline of consistency. Then we will explore examples of how Democrats are not liberal but conservative, and how Republicans are not conservative but in fact liberal. I know people might already be mad at my statements, but please stop drinking the Kool-Aid long enough to put aside your preconceived ideas. And let's explore this topic in a way that is unbiased and allows some clarity into the intentionally muddied waters of politicians and lawyers. And by lawyers, I mean the unelected people that influence politicians, such as lobbyists and the so-called experts. This is how I define liberal and conservative from a political perspective. Liberal, from liberty. It is a value system that is permissive to freedoms and allows people to live as they please. Conservative, from conservation. It is a value system that upholds and protects for the stability and sustainability for future generations. I use my own definitions because many modern dictionaries have been co-opted by lawyers and have been manipulated to suit the needs of a political agenda. But feel free to explore different definitions. They will say more or less what I said, unless they have been totally compromised as to the point of abandoning their etymological foundations. The following slides are examples how language can be manipulated to drive an agenda. The environment. A conservative perspective would seek to protect the wilderness and enforce protection measures to perpetuate a stable and healthy ecosystem. A liberal perspective would allow people to freely use the environment and exploit resources as they need to improve the quality of their life. If the liberal way prevails in regards to the environment, the Earth would experience unprecedented, wanton destruction of our ecosystem. Example number 2, gun rights. A liberal, someone who promotes liberties and freedoms, would have to allow the freedom to own guns. If you are confused and annoyed because you think liberals are trying to take guns and conservatives want everyone to be armed, it is because you have been brainwashed by mainstream media's propaganda. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid and think for yourself. So yes, a liberal perspective is one that is permissive of gun ownership. A conservative view, however, in this instance, is not an antonym, because conservative would refer to upholding and protecting the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, which is in fact a very liberal value, because so few nations allow and trust their citizens with the freedom to own firearms, like here in the United States. Those that vote to take guns away are neither liberal nor conservative. They are instead ruled by the manipulations of politicians and mainstream media, which sways influence through propaganda and fear-mongering. All too often, the people that would vote to ban guns are the same people that say they do not trust the government, nor the police. So why would you hand over your ability and freedom to defend yourself to an entity you have no faith in? Therefore, liberal and conservative values are actually in alignment, and the opposite viewpoint is that of tyranny, paranoia, and hypocrisy. Example number 3, slavery. Personally, I think slavery is absolutely abhorrent and has no place in society, and I include prisoners who work for pennies an hour here in the United States. Either pay prisoners federal minimum wage or don't force them to work at all. Slavery should never be accepted, ever, even as a form of punishment. A liberal view would be to allow people to pursue any form of economic advantage, including the enslavement of others. Conservatives would likewise seek to maintain slavery since it's been part of human existence since time immemorial. So liberals and conservatives, for different reasons, would agree to maintain slavery. The opposite view is a modern Enlightenment era perspective, with the UK being the first country to abolish slavery in 1833. It is true that modern-day liberals would be opposed to slavery, but so would modern-day conservatives. I know people with extreme views on both sides, and none of them would condone slavery, including anarchists, who by definition would allow anything. But even the anarchists have their limits, which means that they're not really anarchists at all. But I'll save that topic of anarchy for another video. The Civil Rights era is where liberal and Democrat and conservative and Republican became linked. A liberal view would seek freedoms and rights for all people, while a conservative would be resistant to changes in the status quo. This is when Democrats and Republicans experienced a rebranding, so to speak. After all, it was the Democrats that represented the South and fought to uphold slavery, while the enlightened North fought to abolish slavery and maintain the Union. By the 1960s, the Democrats under Kennedy and Johnson became the champions for civil rights. Coupled with Franklin Roosevelt's legacy of Social Security, public works, and other forms of aid during the Great Depression, it is no wonder that it seemed like the Democrats were doing all the heavy lifting for the downtrodden and marginalized peoples. FDR and JFK both died in office. People who die before their time, especially world leaders, are often put on a pedestal because of the potential they had left in them. We are left to fantasize about what could have been. This gives them an allure and shields them from scrutiny because their final chapters were never written, and the human imagination can be more vivid and merciful than reality. Therefore, it is because of the Civil Rights era and the legacies of FDR and JFK that puts Democrats in an unrealistic light as champions of the downtrodden and marginalized. The same can be applied for Lincoln. His original goal was not to abolish slavery, it was to preserve the Union. It was not until later that he embraced the enlightened view of abolition. And like Roosevelt and Kennedy, he died in office before his time, leaving us with fantasies about what could have been. And because what could have been is likely better than what would have been, we view these leaders with extra esteem. And just like the terms conservative and liberal, these legacies transcend their own shortcomings and the limits of a definition. and are used as a rallying cry for an ideology not based in reality, but based in the machinations of political entities that manipulate our understanding for their own end goals. In conclusion, the terms liberal and conservative have devolved to become little more than meaningless tropes to be used as political rallying cries to organize voters like a shepherd uses a dog to guide his flock of sheep into a corral. Politicians have an agenda, and if it requires sabotaging the shared language we use, they will do it. These same politicians can be forgiven, or their sins forgotten, if they die prematurely in office. When they die in office, they become deified as martyrs, their wrongdoing forgiven or overlooked, because only the most righteous would make the ultimate sacrifice, right? Do not let words or the manipulation of words define your political beliefs. Define each issue you care about and define your stance. Do not say, I am a liberal or I am a conservative. Instead, say, I agree with this issue or I disagree with that issue. If you say, I am a conservative or I am a liberal, you will more than likely vote for a politician who says, I am a conservative or I am a liberal. But if you clearly state what you agree with or what you disagree with, you might find out your champion politician is nothing more than a manipulative shill. When push comes to shove, you will likely find that the person you voted for will cower behind the vapid slogans of party lines, too afraid to speak their truth, instead hoping you'll be too stupid to see through their spineless lies.